very rare specimen. I have a dusty cat who is Snuggly, which like happens once a month. So I'm enjoying it. What we're gonna do today for the live video is we are gonna do questions. And I made a post a few hours ago asking if anyone had any questions. And so I have a list. I'm gonna go through those ones first. There's a few there. But if you guys have any questions live in the chat, there we go. Put them just like things, Jill. Put them into the live chat feed with capitals. If you do it all caps, then I'll be able to scroll through and quickly see it as questions. I'm gonna pause the chat, so I won't necessarily be able to see what you guys are doing, so that I can go through and get all the questions. But I'm gonna start with these ones first, because every time I do one of these like Q&A things, I'm always like, I should ask people what their questions are ahead of time. And then I always forget, but I got a few this time. So we're gonna start with that. Ian is working on a video right now, so he's not going to be joining, I don't think, unless he needs a break, and then he pops out for a little bit. But he's working on a video that we're gonna try to get out quickly this week. It's about glads. We make a glad arrangement, and like I show how we've grown the glads and show off some of the flowers, because we did a glad unboxing in the spring and a bunch of you were really excited about the glads, so it's fun to get to finally do something with them. And then we have a vlog that we're working on about the fire. So if you guys don't know, there was a big fire in our town. A lot of houses burnt down. There was a lot of people that got displaced from fire. A lot of people evacuated out. So we have a vlog about what happened with us. We're completely fine. We're completely safe. We didn't have any problems with the fire. But it was a pretty stressful time. But yeah, we're getting back on top of things now. That's my update. I'm trying to keep it brief so that we can just get to questions, so we can get through a lot of questions today, because I really can't stay for 2 hours because I have to do some harvesting. Okay, so let's see. First question. What do we got? Flower farming seems to be the content of the moment. Will you change direction if flower content falls out of favor? So I know that we're obviously making content about flower farming, right? But when I think about what the content of our channel is, I don't actually think of us as a flower farming channel. I think of us as a lifestyle channel, I guess. I think that our story isn't the story of flower farming, but our story is the story of what building towards a profitable farm business. So right now we're doing flowers. We're working towards flowers. We're kind of still pivoting because we're still trying, to find what it takes to be profitable. But that's part of the reason, because we get comments a lot of people being like, I just want to see the flowers. I don't care about how much money you made at the market. But for us, how much money we made at the market and, what isn't working, what is working is very much the story that we're trying to tell, because we're trying to tell a story about building a farm. And, all those things are what it really takes to build a farm. So yes, we're making flower farming content. We might not keep making flower farming content because we'll make content relevant to whatever the business is. We're gonna always keep the YouTube running parallel to whatever it is we're doing as the business. So if the business changes and we're doing something else, we joke about being a content farm. It's we say sometimes, oh, it'd be nice to grow vegetables again, but not to sell, but to, donate to our local food bank. You know, if we did that on the farm, then that is what the videos would be about. So I'm not promising flower farming content forever, but that is, whatever we're doing on the farm is going to be the content forever. Do you think your market sales have gone down because some of those people are now coming to the stand at will instead of waiting for the market? So I know that this is one thing that doesn't necessarily translate really well in the videos, and you know, it's also depending on the area that you live in. Like, our experience wouldn't be the experience of other people, but like, we're a half an hour away from where the farmers market is. So we go to the Kelowna farmers market, but we don't actually live in Kelowna. The area that we live in is called Lake Country, and it's like it kind of is like a suburb of Kelowna, but it also is, like, you know, the next small town. And people in the Kelowna area, they're not super keen on, like, driving everywhere always. So a half an hour in, like, some communities would be a really reasonable drive to go, you know, pick up some stuff. But most people in our area wouldn't necessarily drive all the way from Kelowna to come to our farm just to buy flowers. They'd maybe come out to our farm to go to other farms, right? To be like, oh, I'm gonna hit a fruit stand and Serina's flower booth and buy some fresh eggs in the area. Or they're like, oh, I'm gonna do a wine tour and I'm gonna pick up flowers when I'm out there. But so very much like the customer that we're kind of servicing at the Kelowna Farmers Market isn't necessarily the customer that we're servicing at our roadside stand. The roadside stand really is functioning to be for the local community, and like, it's amazing that we have like a really strong local community to be able to do that. But because, like, we're talking about not necessarily doing the Kelowna Farmers Market in the future, and so, you know, we'd be losing out on a lot of our potential customer base. You know, so if we weren't doing the Kelowna Farmers Market, maybe we'd want to consider doing something else that would make it so we could reach people in Kelowna. Yeah, so to answer the question of, is the stand busy and the market slow because it's the same people just buying from the stand? I don't think it is, but there is a little bit of overlap. Okay, what do you think is your most profitable flower crop this year? I ask because I was surprised how profitable my tulip crop was this year. Sunflowers have actually not sold as well as I had expected. So, you know, I haven't necessarily crunched, you know, like, in my mind when I'm working with the crops, I'm crunching if the crops have been have been profitable, but I haven't necessarily then, like, crunched all the numbers in relation to each other. So we do have some stuff that hasn't been profitable. There's some things that, you know, I'd been saying, like, oh, it's going to be a crop loss, like the Lysianthus. I'd been saying that the Lysianthus is going to be not doing anything, but they've actually ended up performing a lot better than I thought they would. So the Lysianthus, when I was like, oh, we're gonna lose money on them, is actually looking to be very strong. But, you know, it's a little tricky, right? Because to say what is my most profitable crop, I have to, like, break down how much I charge for it, and then in the bouquet, and how many of them I've put into the bouquets, and how many of that specific bouquet has sold. So I don't know. Okay, so tulips have been okay for us this year, right? Like, they weren't highly profitable, but we made money on them. Ranunculus, we didn't do great on. Anemones, we lost money because they didn't produce at all. We didn't sell, like, any stems. Lilies, oh, you know what? Probably lilies. Let's say lilies. Lilies was the most profitable crop for me this year. The reason why lilies was the most profitable crop for me is because I sell my lilies for $5 in a bouquet. That's like what I price them at. which is if I was doing lilies as an annual in a similar way to tulips, right? So if I was like buying in lily bulbs, planting them, because lilies you can succession plant to get a continuous harvest on them. So if I was doing lilies that way, you know, lilies are about like $1 wholesale. You know, and then selling them for $5. There'd be a bunch of labor for the managing it and everything. And then the lilies didn't actually sell super well for me. I had lilies at a period of time, like in June, when I didn't have anything else. The lilies saved my butt. I had 6 weeks where I wouldn't have been able to make bouquets if I didn't have the lilies. Having the lilies made it so I could still make bouquets, still be selling, even if they weren't people's favorite bouquets of the year. And because I didn't grow the lilies as an annual, where there's all this expense and all this labor, my only labor and so like expense to the lilies this year was weeding the lilies, because the lilies that I was picking and selling are perennialized lilies that I planted last year and the year before. So in total, we have about 1,000 lilies throughout the property, and the different colors bloom at different times, which is why we're able to get 6 weeks of harvest. But yeah, so all I did was weed them once. I actually let them get completely overgrown with weeds. Even when I was harvesting them, they were pretty overgrown with weeds. At this point, they really need a weed, but they're not a priority. So the amount of labor that I put into them is so low. And then even though I didn't sell every single lily stem that I harvested because they weren't super popular, the fact that the ones that I did sell sold at $5 means that they're probably the most profitable flower of the year. But I'm not necessarily investing into more lilies. And so then after lilies, like, you know, if I'm going to kind of go through my focal list, after the lilies, I started to have the Lisianthus as a focal, and they're expensive. I spent, you know, like $1,500 on plugs. So I spent a lot of money on Lisianthus, but I also sell them for a pretty good price. I sell them for $3.50, $3.50, depending on how sad they are. And they sell really well. So I haven't been able to sell all my Lisianthus stems because I planted like 3,000 or 4,000 of them, and the plan was to be able to sell them to florists. So because I'm not selling every single stem, compared to the fact that I need every stem that I don't sell takes 50 cents off the profitability of the stems that I do sell because of the fact that I had to pay money for the plugs. But the labor on the Lisianthus has been fairly low. I weeded them only twice, and transplanting them is really fast and really easy because the plugs are so small, and because I plant a mass of them into a small area. So, you know, all of that makes it so that if I could improve on my stem length for the Lisianthus, and once my stem length is improved, then I'd be able to sell all the stems by being able to do wholesale and things like that. And once that happens, I think that Lisianthus is in the future going to be the most profitable flower that we grow on the farm. I think it has a lot of potential. Sunflowers are also really profitable. We sell sunflowers at $2.50 per flower retail, and my cost for sunflowers is so low. I direct seed them, so I don't have any sort of like seedlings. It takes me like, you know, gathering the sunflowers, finding my seeder, taking it out to the field, walking the row, and then putting the tools away. It takes me 30 minutes. And then we did a single weed on the sunflowers, and then harvesting them is very, very fast too. So all those things factored in, the cost for sunflowers is very low compared to the $2.50 that I can sell it for. And like, but it's probably not the most profitable this year because we haven't sold all the sunflowers that I grew. I probably only sold about 2/3 of the sunflowers that I picked. And I've had sunflowers that I didn't pick in time, so I just left them in the field. So like if I get a balance in on the sunflowers, they also have the chance to be the most profitable. And then there's one more focal that I'm like excited to crunch profitability numbers on, and that's dahlias. I planted my dahlias like beginning of July, which is crazy. I planted them into a tunnel with the plan that I was going to be harvesting off of them for like mid-September through October. I wanted them to be my focal for when like Lisianthus and zinnias start to slow down. Something to just like bring excitement to the fall season. And they're looking on track. I have like buds on the first plants now. So in 2 weeks from now, I'll be harvesting lots, and the plants are super healthy and super happy, which they never look like this year. And because I planted them in the height of summer, at this point I've only weeded them once, and there's no other weeds that are sprouting. Like spring is kind of the time when a lot of weeds come. So depending on what my labor is for managing the unheated tunnel that they're in, they could have potential for being like a strong contender for profitability as a fall bloom, because the dahlias I'll probably sell for maybe $3.50, similar to the Lisianthus per stem in a bouquet. And I'm not going to do any of like the bagging type stuff because my pest pressure is going to be down like as the weather cools. So I'm excited to see those, but most profitable flowers. It's a tricky one, right? Because the one thing that you need to remember is how much labor you spend, right? Like the Lisianthus is a pretty good example. They're very expensive, right? Like, I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on Lisianthus plugs, but the amount of money that labor costs makes it so the money that I spent on the plugs might not matter if I can get it to be a low labor crop. So it's profitability, and like other people's profitability is, it's hard to base your business completely on it because everyone's numbers are going to be completely different as their growing conditions are different and their customers are different and their pricing's different, right? Like another thing to consider is my pricing is quite low, right? If I was doing like florist like wedding style work, I wouldn't necessarily be selling my Lisianthus for $3 and my dahlias for $3, right? The prices could be like up quite a bit, be like more like $10 is the retail price, but the volume that I'd be selling wouldn't be the same. So, my whole farm system is based on high volume, lower profitability per stem, but higher total stems. So sometimes my numbers sound a little weird. Okay, next question. Caroline Devinold. Okay. What's the best advice you can give to a startup flower gardener ultimately wanting to sell flowers working with limited space? What top 5 flowers would you suggest when considering that space limitation? So like obviously, okay, so my whole system is based on like I just said, trying to sell a lot to get to a higher total number, which then makes it so that there's efficiencies that make it so I can afford to sell some of my stems for a lower price, in order to move a higher volume, right? So I'm kind of like building a farm system that could be great for wholesale. My whole the whole concept of us doing these $20 bouquets is to have them be very, very low customer service cost, right? We can afford to sell $20 bouquets because we don't do a lot of work to sell the $20 bouquets. If the work of selling the bouquet, and that's part of the reason why we're talking about getting rid of the farmers market, right? Because we can't move enough volume at the farmers market if we're not doing $1,000 to be able to afford to sell our flowers for the low price that we do actually sell them for. Unless we're doing the $1,000 volume, the price per stem numbers that we've kind of gone into the system building, they don't really work, right? Like unless we hit that $1,000 mark, and have these like labor efficiencies that are built into our system of moving a lot of stems, we can't hit that profitability number of, you know, work plus money spent equals 0 or more. That's the goal, right? So for us, our goal was always like a sales number. So our goal from the very beginning of starting the farm was to sell $100,000 a year in retail, like in gross sales. Because if we did that, then after we take out the expenses and after we take out the labor costs, we would have enough money. Like the plan was basically to have about a third of that be able to be profit to cover like my labor, and like, you know, building the farm and all that. So we were kind of expecting like a full-time employee that would cost, you know, like a similar, like kind of a $30,000 employee expense, and then have like a $30,000 to be able to invest into maybe additional labor, equipment, other things to build towards efficiencies, infrastructure, all that kind of stuff, you know, and then a third to take out to cover like my wage. And the idea of the farm from the beginning for us was to kind of be full-time for me, but only part-time for Ian, to be able to have another way of making income, which at this point has become the YouTube, right? YouTube is, we have 2 jobs. This is how we pay the bills in a little bit more financially stable way. We have 2 jobs. One of our jobs is doing these YouTube videos, and we devote a full-time amount of hours to it, and we prioritize it having time, and we have to make sure that we balance the time that we give to YouTube, with the time that's available for the farm, right? And then our other job is the farm, and we both kind of work in both of those businesses, but you know, there's some division of labor depending on who is needed where. But yeah, so the question of if you have a very small space, what would I recommend doing, is tricky for me to answer, because I've built my business in this totally different way of thinking, which is rather than looking at what. Well, okay. I was gonna say I didn't build for a limitation. I built for like a goal, but that's not true. For me on our farm, and we talk about this all the time, our biggest limitation is time, right? Like, and that's why I'm like talking about like profitability. Don't, like, make sure to count your labor, right? Like I need the farm to pay me $35,000 a year to do this, like ongoing, because it has to pay for the time that I give to the farm, because that's time that I could be spending at another full-time job. You know, all labor is our biggest limitation on the farm, because we don't have an infinite number of hours a day. So we need to make sure that what we're doing works with the number of hours that we can give the farm, and making sure that those hours are paid for. So if your limitation is size, you know, then that's kind of like the focus that you're going to start from for designing your farm. But I think that you need more than just to know your limitation. You need to also know your goal, right? So for us, we only have so much time that we can give to the farm, but out of that time, we need to make $100,000, because if we make $100,000, then that is the way that time is able to be make sense in the context of the loss of time being spent in other places, like me having a full-time job. So you know, you only have so much space. You know, the next, if it was me and I was developing a farm and I had a limited space, my next set of questions, rather than like what flowers would I grow, would have to be like, how much time do I have to spend on the farm? How much money do I want to make from the farm? Like I'd kind of figure out what are my other limitations, right? So if let's say I had I don't know, 5,000 square feet, which for like, that's a lot. You can do a lot with 5,000 square feet. My other limitation is that I can't do it full time. I have a job, so I can only give 15 hours a week to the farming. Then I'd be like, okay, do I have 15 hours a week for just like the summer, or do I have 15 hours a week all year round? How much money do I want to make? Do I want to make, let's say you want to do as much as possible, like you want to work as many weeks possible in your farm. You have 5,000 square feet, you have 15 hours a week to devote to it, and your goal is to sell $15,000. So for me, we have a 25-week growing season. I break that down into $4,000 a week because I'm trying to hit $100,000. Or I have a 25-week selling season. My growing season is longer than that because I grow on the front end to be able to have 25 weeks of production. So let's say you're trying to do 5,000, you have 25 weeks, or 15,000, you have 25 weeks, you have this small space. The question then is, okay, in 25 weeks, I need to, I don't know what the math is. I've picked difficult math. Let's say, okay, you have 30 weeks. You're zone 7. You have a really long season. To make the math easier, that means that you want to be producing $500 a week. You only have 5,000 square feet. So then you start looking at it being like, okay, what's flowers that sell for a high price that I can, build into bouquets that are cut and come again and take up a small amount of space. And then you're like, oh, what are my conditions? If I'm zone 7, I can grow a lot of stuff, right? I'm gonna be planning for like a cool flower crop, a summer crop, a fall crop. You look at what your goal is, you figure out like how you're gonna reach that goal, and then you look at what your limitations are, and then you use that to come up with your list, right? So I know that like when people are like, Serina, what would you do? Like you specifically said, what are the top 5 flowers you suggest when considering space limitations? I know I haven't given you flowers, but it's because like what I grow in the smallest amount of space isn't necessarily a helpful answer, because it all depends on what your specific conditions are and what you're trying to do with that space. So it's better to like figure out these things for yourself and to like create a crop plan, and to crunch the numbers and like actually walk through all the steps, do all the research, because if you do that, you're going to be way stronger than if you just like take someone's list of like 5 flowers and grow that. All the work that you put into planning is going to be there for you year after year after year, right? So even if you make this plan and the plan doesn't work, it's not going to be a complete failure. You'll be able to tweak it. Whereas if I say like, oh, five things, like Lisianthus, I plant super tight. The spacing's like 2 inches on Lisianthus. You can cram them. I planted 3,000 to 4,000 Lisianthus in 2 3 by 50 foot beds, right? So like, what is that? That's 300 square feet, and and a Lisianthus could get you 2 stems per plant in that spacing. So in 300 square feet, you could potentially grow, 8,000 stems of Lisianthus. That's like crazy, right? But that's not necessarily going to help you achieve any of your goals, because like, what are you going to do with 8,000 Lisianthus in the course of like 4 weeks? If you're not able to sell it, it kind of doesn't matter that you can grow it. You need to have like a full encompassing business plan. But yeah, so, gotta do the math. One of my resources for like crunching all of this, so like how I started planning for my flower farm plan, is I read The Flower Farmer by Liz Basinski, I think is how you pronounce, or Lynn Basinski, I think is how you pronounce her name. Really great book. It gives you just like a really great introduction to flower farming to get you like started. And then from there, I did a lot of research on Johnny Seed's website. It's great. They have like tons of flower options and like tons of info under every single flower about growing and everything. They talk about like weeks to bloom in Johnny's, like how long they have to grow for, you know, so it's a resource that will give you the numbers that you need to be able to do the math. And the book, the Flower Farmer book, will give you the general concepts to understand things like succession planting and farm planning, to be able to pair with Johnny's to make a plan for yourself. And then you keep tweaking it. Okay. I don't even know if that answers the question for anyone. And I have the chat pause, so I don't know if you're like, Serina, stop rambling. But we want to get through lots of questions, so let's keep going. Do you battle strong, high winds? If so, what kind of support do you use to your flower beds? So I am very, very lucky. You know, one of the reasons why I don't want to give specific answers ever, right? Like me not wanting to tell you five good, like, high density flowers, is I live in a really weird place. We have like no humidity where we are, so we get like no fungal disease. We don't have rain. It's hot and dry in the summer, even though I'm in Canada, and it's cold in the winter, and cold in the winter means that it saves us from a lot of pest pressure. Where I am has like almost no wind. And like we do have winds, but I know that I can't say that I have wind because I know from other people talking that what I have isn't wind that I have to then manage, right? So we do occasionally get some wind, but it's wind that doesn't really affect the plants very much. So because of that, we do very little. We do like zero staking. And this is very weird and very strange. And just because you don't see me staking anything doesn't mean it's like a good idea or a smart idea for anyone else. You know, we get enough wind to kind of stabilize the plants without having wind that comes in and flattens things. Because we get no water and it's so dry here, we don't have weight on the plants too. So this is another reason why we don't have to do very much stabilizing. Other places, so we had rain the other day for the first time in my entire life. It like rained a lot. We got some rain that was like sent up here from the Hillary storm down in California, and we had so much rain that like our outbuilding flooded because, you know, we have our entire property drains to the front door of the outbuilding. Never has been an issue before because we've never actually had rain, like this one single rain. And I think the rain was like in an hour we got like 2 inches or 3 inches, so it's not even like crazy numbers. Following that rain, when I went out into the garden, we had a lot of damage because so much water came down onto the flowers that the plants got heavy from the rain and they fell over. We've never had to worry about that ever happening because we never get rain in the summer. But this is the type of thing that other people have to deal with, right? Like rain is a normal thing for people. So, you know, most people, because with cut flowers, they're tall plants, right? Like the best cut flowers possible are like tall, leggy, unhappy plants. They're the type of things that you wouldn't necessarily want to grow in your garden because they're going to be tall and spindly and weird looking. But when they're tall and spindly and weird looking, when you cut them, they make these like amazing skinny stems for going in vases with nice flowers, tall, straight. All of those things that make cut flowers look great in the vase make them more difficult to have out in the farm. So we don't do anything, but I know there is things to do for wind and for support. You can do something called corralling, which is like you kind of like make a cage around the outside and then you like tie them in. You can stake, which is like tomatoes, right? You put like a stake in the ground, the plant grows up, and then you tie it to the stake so that the stake is there to support it. But one of the most common things that flower farmers do is they use netting. They use something called Horta Nova, I'm pretty sure, which is like a plastic mesh style netting. The spaces are about this big. What you do is you get like big stakes, you get like T-posts out in your garden, and then you put the netting over it when the plants are small. Like here's the ground. Like when the plants are this big, you got the netting. The plants grow up through the netting, and because the netting is there to support it, when the wind comes, it shakes, but it doesn't fall over. And I hate the stuff. It's like super annoying. So I've never used it because I've been able to get away with not using it. But we might have to use it in the future on Lisianthus, because if you guys have watched like the Lisianthus video, you know the Lisianthus, they're nothing. They're a stick, and then all these flowers. So they've all kind of started to lean. And ideally, I'd like something to keep my Lisianthus standing up straight. So that's what I'd use for wind and for support. Kind of stakes holding up this Horta Nova netting, which then give it some support. And depending on how high wind or how much support you need for your plants, people will do like multi-layers, right? So here's the ground, and then they put a level of netting, and then the plants grow up through the netting, but then they need some more, so then they put a second layer above it, and that'll give like crazy amounts of support. So I don't use it, but I don't use it because I'm very, very lucky. So those are some ideas for wind. I've been seeing other flower farmers talk about having to lower the price point on the bouquets and attributing it to coming down from the COVID wave where flowers were really selling. Making smaller bouquets at a lower price point, but offering larger ones as well for the regular price. Have you experimented with that at your farmer's market? So I kind of addressed why we haven't and why we probably wouldn't do that when I was talking about having to do a certain number of volume to be able to support our prices. So for me, the $20 price point is kind of the sweet spot where the amount of labor that I put into the bouquet has the ability to like streamline. Okay, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. So, okay, I'll start with the answer. I would not make a bouquet for less than $20 because I can't afford to sell a bouquet for less than $20. And the reason why that's the case is that there's certain things that cost a set amount of money no matter how expensive the bouquets are. And so an example of that is like the wrap on the bouquet. That piece of paper costs me, I don't know, a couple cents. And the labor that it takes to like physically wrap the bouquet, that amount of money that I spend in my labor and in the paper is consistent if the bouquet sells for $5 or if the bouquet sells for, $30. Anything higher than that, and I actually use two pieces of paper and I staple the paper together, so the labor's double. So my $40 bouquets have the same cost. The wrap is the same cost on a $40 bouquet as it is on a $20 bouquet in percentage of expense to total sales, right? So the reason why that number matters is if it's going to cost me 30 cents in labor and 5 cents in paper and staples, so 35 cents for every single wrap, 35 cents on my $18 bouquets, because my bouquets, the other thing to know is my bouquets aren't $20, my bouquets are actually $18 plus tax. And this I need to know, because if not, if I lose track of the fact that $2 of it has to instantly go away in tax back to the government, then I might not be being profitable on the bouquet, right? So you need remember the tax. Don't forget the tax. So 35 cents off of $18 is, I guess, okay. I'm getting the calculator. Let's figure out what the percentage cost is. So, I don't know. What would it be? 35 or 0.35 divided by 18? I don't know. And then, so 2%? I'm brain farting on the math. But I think 2% of my cost on that bouquet is a wrap at $18, which is like the $20 bouquet. But so if I made a $10 bouquet, then it would be 4% of the cost of that bouquet is in the wrap, right? And so the labor that it takes to put together a $10 bouquet in my hand, right? Even though I'm using less stems, right? So if I use half as many stems, there's half as much spent in flowers. But the labor of putting the bouquet together, I couldn't make two $10 bouquets in the same amount of time that I make a $20 bouquet. It would probably take me maybe even 80% of the time that it takes to make the $20 bouquet to make a $10 bouquet, right? So that makes it so that the cheaper bouquets are actually more costly to me in percentage wise per bouquet. So then, like, which doesn't matter so much when you're just like selling 5 bouquets, right? It's like, oh, what's $1 in labor versus $1.20 in labor on $100, right? It's like it doesn't really matter that much. But once you get the system into these bigger numbers, into these 100,000 numbers, like what I'm aiming for, then that number matters, right? Because the amount of time that I have is the most limited, right? So because my time is limited, if I can only produce like $75,000 worth of bouquets in the amount of time that I have, if I'm making smaller bouquets, Bo's here, he's bumping on then I can never achieve my $100,000 goal. So I always have to be very aware of like where I'm spending the labor, and how it works out with total sales. So if I was to do these smaller bouquets, the math wouldn't work out, right? And so, so the $20 bouquets, the math works out if I can sell enough of them. But if I can't sell enough of them, then I need to rethink my pricing structure, right? So maybe $10 bouquets would make sense if what I was selling is, right? So a $10 bouquet is going to be $9, right? So if I'm selling a $10 bouquet that is 3 sunflowers and I'm not wrapping it, then maybe that makes sense versus selling a sunflower bouquet that is 7 sunflowers and wrapped at $20, because I'm now selling the sunflowers at a higher price to offset the labor, and all of that, right? So there is ways that you could do it, but for us specifically, selling, we wouldn't be able, we'd have to just scrap the market bouquets, right? Like, where we are already, it makes sense to, instead of totally reinventing the wheel, it makes sense for us to pivot, right? Because like I said, we've built the farm on a system that makes it so we can sell for a lower price per stem, because we are then doing volume and there's efficiencies in volume. So it makes more sense for us to scrap retail sales at the farmer's market and instead pivot more towards wholesale sales, because that's the farm system we've created, rather than to scrap the high volume farm system and I'm bleeding. Bug bit me or something. I got a bug bite and I've been scratching at it. Yeah. So no, we're not going to sell cheaper bouquets. But I do like, I know that like, you know, that's all like very like ideas. But one thing that I could do, because there is a way we could sell lower a $10 bouquet and have it make sense for labor and everything, and that is doing straight bunches, right? So a mixed arrangement, a mixed bouquet costs us more money to make than a single variety bouquet. So we didn't do it this year because like if we're not selling enough volume, it doesn't make sense to necessarily diversify in a huge way on our price points. But we've crunched the numbers on it, and doing straight bunches does, and being able to sell them for less money does make sense. So we could do like bunches of zinnias for $10, and you know, bunches of individual varieties, and they make sense because we wouldn't have to double handle them. We could make bunches in the field, right? So we could go out to the zinnias, pick bunches of zinnias, elastic them, throw them into the bucket, and then sell them like that. Whereas a mixed bouquet, we basically make bunches. You know, we don't elastic them, but we put them into the bucket like we would if they were bunches, and then we take them out and we handle them to rearrange them. So there definitely is ways that you can afford to like to do lower prices, but just, you know, think about your labor. Don't forget about your labor. Okay, one last question, then I can start trying to get through the chat. For those of us growing on limited space, what would you say is your most profitable crop per square foot? And what are your 3 favorite perennial foliages? I've got mountain mint and apple mint, but looking to add one more. Okay, so foliage, whichever one that is. This year, super excited about 2. The first one is bee balm. We grew like super easy to grow. It got super tall, very productive, 1 million stems. Very happy with it. And then this year too, we did, I already knew I liked it, but I've been growing it poorly for a while. And I finally did a mass planting of it, and I'm in love. But anise hyssop is just incredible. My system for anise hyssop going forward, I'm gonna manage. So my problem with anise hyssop is inconsistently perennial, and you know, I don't think that's a reason to discard it. For me here on the farm, feverfew and rudbeckia are also inconsistently perennial, but they've been incredible. Despite that, because what happens is about 50% of them die off. So every year I grow more, and then I go through my perennialized patch, and anywhere one of the plants is dead, I plant one of the new plugs that I've grown for that year. And what that does is it means that I actually have a built-in succession to those crops, right? So the ones that overwintered and survived, the ones that, you know, that grew as a perennial, they bloom like a lot earlier, and then like right as they're kind of finishing off, the ones that got planted as the new plants for the year, they start blooming. So because I manage them in this kind of, you know, half of it dies, half of it doesn't way, I can keep that one space, always that plant, but I can get this kind of like succession built in on just having to refresh the bed. And like, I really like it. So anise hyssop does that for me. But yeah, it's great, right? Because when it's perennial, it starts producing in like mid-June for me. And then the planting that I planted this year, which is all fresh and all new for this year, lots of height, like it looks great. It's as good as the ones that overwintered, and it's now, I've been harvesting it for 3 weeks, and I wouldn't be surprised if I can like get it into like maybe even the end of September. So like a really great one to kind of have as a succession. It smells amazing, it looks amazing. Highly recommend it. Okay, let's see. what limited space, what's your most profitable crop per square foot? So honestly, like Lysianthus. Lysianthus is crazy. So spacing on Lysianthus, 2 inches. So that means like in a square foot, like I could have like 35 plants potentially, which I don't. I definitely don't have it that tight because I think I did it like every 2 inches. But then I had like more than 2 inches in between the plants. But yeah, no, Lysianthus in a square foot, like 12 plants, no problem. And then each of those plants could produce 2 stems if you're like doing it right. And then they sell for like a really good price. So, like even if you're going to say like in a square foot you can get 20 stems of Lysianthus and you're going to sell it at wholesale for $2 a stem, that's $40 per square foot. That's like crazy. And other people like can get like a second flush on them too. So it's like you could maybe even do that twice. Like they're amazing, but they're a pain in the butt to grow from seed. So don't grow it from seed. Just buy in plugs. Buying in plugs is like you save so much money buying plugs, even though the plugs are expensive. So that's what I recommend on square footage. Okay, so took me forever, but I got through the questions and I'm gonna start going through on the chat. I can't stay super late. I can probably only do about an hour and a half, so I'm probably not gonna get through the chat unless you guys weren't asking anything. Okay, let's see. When do your cherry trees start losing their leaves? So the cherry trees, they're kind of like anytime fall leaves happen. We don't get a lot of fall color here in the Okanagan, but I don't know, like end of October. I feel like we usually have frost before the trees drop their leaves, but yeah, I don't know, October, November. I only use the cherries. I only use them for the spring. So so my cherry trees, they're like right there. The main thing that we do with them at this point is I use them for filler in the spring. And the leaves at this point are like really like bug eaten. The bugs have come and eaten them, and they don't look good. They don't look pretty. They got like cherry juice splattered all over them from birds eating cherries in my trees. And they're big. Like the leaves are like a really, really large leaf. So when I use it as a filler, I'm using the immature leaves. I only pick them when the leaves are about this big. Once they get bigger than that, I stop using them. And then at that point, I move on to using my apricots, and then I have a plum tree because the leaves on those they have a more petite leaf. If you use something that has this big massive leaf in a bouquet, it looks really awkward. And like Kelly talking about the fires, yeah, and the air quality. We've been lucky. When that rain came through, it really cleared out the air. But so it's been nice to be able to be outside. The air, it's ramping up. We're surrounded by some like really bad fires. We have a fire that is a couple towns above us, about 2 hours from where we are. That's like crazy big. It's like 41,000 hectares last I heard, which is huge. That's like 4 times bigger than the fire that like burnt our community. And then so the air from all the fires just like comes into our valley. So I think we're gonna have pretty bad air quality for the next month, which makes me sad because we've been so lucky so far this year. But luckily, I have lots of masks. I'll survive. Then I can breathe winter air. Let's see, question. You have a very special way of germinating bells of Ireland out in the cold. Please give the very gory details. Yeah, okay, so the bells of Ireland, so I've been watching online in like Facebook groups, people doing something called winter sowing. And so what winter sowing is, like, it's very specific. Like there's like people who are into winter sowing are like, it has to be exactly this way. you take milk jugs and you cut them and then you tape them back together and you put seeds in and then you tape them and you put them outside in the winter and then they grow and then they grow earlier. And I was like, that's a lot of work. I have no interest in saving milk jugs and cutting milk jugs and taping things. I was like, but I understand what the milk jug is doing. The milk jug is a greenhouse, basically. The milk jug, it's vented because it's got the opening, but it's like holding in, like when the sun comes, it warms up and it germinates. And I was like, well, I have a greenhouse. So I've done some experiments with winter sowing, which is basically I start in my seedling trays. I start stuff up over the winter, and then I put it outside in the greenhouse, and then, and I water it every once in a while because we're so dry that over the winter we still need to water. We have no humidity, so the lack of humidity comes and steals all the water out of the air, and the ground. So seedling trays in the greenhouse, they freeze, they don't do anything. And then when the weather finally warms up a bit, super early, because it warms up a lot in my greenhouses when they're closed up, it triggers those seedlings to germinate earlier than they would if they'd been just direct seeded into the garden. And then they grow out, and then you have these very easily grown plants. And then I don't have to fuss around with milk jugs. They're already in my seedling trays. So I've done this in the past and it's worked really well. And so I knew that Bells of Ireland, so anytime you have a seed that's a really big seed, it usually means that it's hard, a hard casing. Big seeds, hard casing, like sunflowers, right? You crack open a sunflower seed, it's hard to get in there, right? It's not like these little soft seeds where if you're making sprouts, if you're making microgreens out of sunflowers, it's hard. There's a hard seed casing to those seeds, unlike if you're doing alfalfa, where all that seed casing, just germinates fast, germinates easy. So the Bells of Ireland are a large, hard seed casing. So I figured that they probably need something called cold stratification, which a lot of these harder seeds need, which is they need to freeze and thaw, to break down the casing so that it's easier for the plants to pop out of the seed shell. So what I did is I started, in January, I started up, because I was like, I want 2 beds worth of Bells of Ireland. I keep failing. I'm going to do 1 million of these. So I started up 12 trays of Bells of Ireland in January, and I watered them, and then I stuck them outside into the freezing cold. They froze hard, and I left them stacked. I just ignored them. And then when I was ready for wanting them to germinate, I brought in the amount that I wanted. So I did them in 2 successions. So I brought in 6 of my 12 and I put them under lights, and I didn't put them on a heat mat or anything, just, whatever the room temperature was, 75, 70. And they germinated great. They germinated really quickly. Still inconsistent germination, which might have been a watering issue. It could have been that they weren't wet enough, or they were too wet when they're sitting outside, or when I was germinating them. Maybe because I just left them on the shelves. Maybe they would have germinated better in a higher humidity situation, like having a dome over top of them. But yeah, the germination was good enough that, I had, let's say 75% of the cells, that came in, and they were really easy to grow from that point on. And then it also made it really easy to manage them, because I only had to do the seed trays once, and then I had the kind of ready to pull in at any point that I wanted. Yeah, so I think there's lots of things that you can do that way. And then the nice thing about kind of doing this winter sowing but in seedling trays technique is you can do some of this like seeding work at a period of time when you have a lot of time and you don't really have anything to do, because spring can be really like kind of crazy. So I did it for the Bells of Ireland, but I'm sure there's lots of things that you could do it too. Um, I'm laughing. Okay, here's the other one. Ian's always eating cherries. How do you stop the birds from eating them all? Which I kind of talked about the leaves being covered in cherry juice. We have like we really should get rid of some of our cherry trees. At this point we only are keeping them for like greenery, because we have so many. So I think we have like 12 cherry trees, and the cherries are ready in like 2 weeks, and they're these big mature cherry trees, so they're like loaded. So we have so many cherries that even if birds get into the cherry trees, like there's still like more than enough for us to eat. The other thing is, because we live in like a cherry orchard area, there isn't a lot of birds around here, and like they do a lot of stuff to keep birds out of the orchards. They kind of like make they're not like trapping birds and murdering birds, but they do all these like cannons and noises and flashy, scary things in the trees to scare the birds away. So like, we're surrounded by cherry orchards, right? The cherry orchard beside us, cherry orchard across the street, cherry orchard a couple houses down the road. So we get chickadees that come and like live in our flower farm. They come and they eat all the seeds from all of my not deadheading that I do. But yeah, we just don't have a lot of birds in the area because they're doing work to keep birds out of the area. So no tricks, I wish. Do you save seeds or order new each year? So I don't do any seed saving. Though I might do some this year because in the front, because I don't have any seeds on hand for like the mini marigolds, and I bought something called portulaca, and like it'd be really easy to grow, but I could just go out and get a handful of seeds, and then I could grow it for the front garden. But I don't do any seed saving for the seeds for my cut flowers, because it's too difficult. I know I spend a lot of money on seeds, but the amount of labor that I have to spend if I didn't spend the money, it makes it so I save money by letting seed farmers grow my seeds for me. I'm very, very specific about colors at this point. I don't grow any sort of mixes, and I always color block plant everything. By color block planting all of my flowers, when I go to cut and harvest, I'm working with one color at a time. They all go into the same bucket. And by doing that, instead of like bringing a mixed bucket in or having to like sort them, once I've like picked them into colors, it saves me a lot of labor when I go to make the bouquets. So the reason why I'm able to plant in color blocks and know exactly what's going to grow in what specific place is because the seed farmers, when they grow them, they're isolating the colors, they're isolating the crops, so that they can be confident that that seed that you buy is specifically going to be that. Whereas if I like went and saved seeds, it'd be more of like a mix, and it's not worth it for me. And like I want to support other farmers, so I'm obsessed with seeds. So I'm more than happy to spend money to support seed farmers, so that I can keep having seed farmers to grow seeds for me and get to have all the fun of shopping for new things and trying new stuff. Yeah, but like a lot of the stuff that I grow does like it self seeds all over the place. If I was like doing a home garden where I wasn't having to be so focused on the labor and efficiencies and like systems and all that, then stuff like the cosmos, the zinnias, like so much of what we grow is really easy to do seed saving. And if you did want to like make sure that the colors aren't mixing, you can isolate those things yourself. You can buy those like organza bags that people like put over the flowers to keep them perfect. If you were to like cover it up so that no pollen is getting into the flowers before it blooms, and then you open it up and like, you know, get another one of the same color, make sure it's getting like pollinated with exactly what you want it to be pollinated with, close it back up, save the seeds from that, you know, then you'd be good to go. I'm too busy. I have other things to do, so I spend money. Let's see. Not sure if my question went through since the phone shut off. Are you guys thinking of doing weddings? Do you think that would be less stressful and more money than markets? I don't think that weddings would be less stressful. I think weddings are the most stressful thing you could possibly do. I don't think that I would be interested in doing like, you know, like a high end wedding. Like, you know, I'd have to make sure that like if we were to do wedding work in the future, it would have to pair with what we're doing, right? So it'd have to be like, hey, this is what I can do. If what I can do is interesting to you as a bride, if what you want is what I can do, then I can do what I can do for you, type thing. But yeah, weddings are super stressful, right? Because, you know, you've made a very big promise to someone, right? Like the roadside stand, we've made a very, very low commitment, right? We've said, yeah, there's flowers out there, right? Like every day of the week, I'm going to try to have flowers out there. But if I didn't have flowers out there, and that happens, right? Sometimes all the flowers sell and I don't realize. And then by the time I find out, it takes me a few hours before I get flowers back in the stand, and someone could pull over and there's no flowers in there. But it's kind of like, well, you know, like it happens. I'm not gonna like destroy someone's super special day if, you know, the stand is sold out for a couple hours midweek, right? Whereas if you mess up on a wedding, it's a really big mess up. So yeah, a lot of stress, and there's a lot of labor involved in doing the weddings, because, you know, the other thing too is you want to have your most perfect flowers. No one's ever going to look at your flowers as hard as they're going to look at your wedding bouquet flowers, right? Because they're going to be in all the pictures, and, you know, so it's a different standard of quality, a different level of commitment, all those things that make it so that weddings are very intimidating to me. But I know that I do have, like, you know, I've built up skills. I definitely I have flower handling skills to be able to process flowers quickly enough to be able to create in a timely manner the volume that would be needed for an event. You know, so that is like a skill that I'm bringing to be able to do wedding work, you know, and the quality of the flowers is, like, you know, exponentially improved from our first years. You know, we're growing the variety of flowers has been elevated over the years. We're growing more high-end flowers and less of like the most simple, most common garden flowers. You know, and every year the pest pressure, you know, the flower quality, all of that improves. So, you know, I'm getting to the point that, you know, I could do the right wedding. You know, I definitely could do like events, like where people are, you know, someone's looking for 20 of the same bouquet, you know, like I can do that, right? So, you know, when we're talking about not having the market for next year, we're not necessarily talking about now going out there and trying to get a wedding every weekend of the year. The way that I would prefer to replace our income is by doing more wholesale. I want us to be planting stuff that we can do more volume of, more wholesale of. I want us to be having different offerings than maybe some of the other local flower farms, and then just working on improving the roadside stand. So when we talk about not doing the market next year, we're not necessarily having a plan, because it's like we have a 25-week season. If we want to do $1,000 a week at the market, or even more, we're talking about wanting $1,500 on a Saturday market. We're not necessarily going to replace that $40,000 worth of sales next year, right? We're gonna be trying something different, and we may have less total sales next year, but if we can do it with less hours, our goal right now is still build the farm for longevity. One of the big things that we're working on this year is to make the burden of maintaining the farm less. So we haven't been able, we haven't done it, right? It's gonna take us a few years to get to where we want the farm to be, but we're kind of rethinking how the farm is so that we can put in crops that are lower labor, so that the total labor hours that it takes to maintain the farm is down, so that we can produce the same amount in less time, so we have time to work on the selling, right? So I'm open-minded to events, but we're not going to become a wedding florist business, right? It's just we'll be able to say yes to potential requests in the way that we've never been able to before, because we couldn't say yes when we were so busy doing a Saturday farmers market. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question. Let's see. I was always wondering, what was you and Ian's primary jobs? You guys are awesome in sharing your experiencing with us, even if you seem to have no time to do so. Yeah, we're best. I always say this, right? Like, best laid plans of mice and men. We go into the season thinking that we can do a lot more than we can do, and then reality hits us in the face, and it's like we can only do so much. But every year we get better at time management, because we get better at not thinking that we can do a million things, and things get a little bit more efficient every year, both in the YouTube and in the farm. So one of these years we'll figure it all out. But yeah, no, before the YouTube got to the point that it's like, paying the bills, because the farm still doesn't pay the bills. The farm still makes $0. The Ian, part of the reason why we were going to do the farm as like a business idea for me, was because Ian did forestry work, like oil patch forestry work. That was mainly in the winter. He had to do it when the ground was frozen. So Ian would leave, he'd be gone for most of the winter, and then he'd be back home full time without work throughout the summer. So that system would have worked really well with farming, where he would be home and available to do work in the summer season, and then in the farming off season, he wouldn't have been there. So there would have been I would have needed to be 100% full time on the kids, because he'd be completely gone for months at a time. So that was why the farming kind of it was oh, this is a good pairing for us. And then the work that he was doing was paying our bills, so the farming there was no pressure on the farming to instantly get to the point that it was paying us, as long as the farm, and it's not been zero. But if the farm was zero, we'd be fine, as long as it was building up to the point it could eventually pay out money. You know, and we're still fine, right? Because the YouTube covers the bills. Um, but I don't want to work on the farm for free forever. I'm fine with like working for the farm because I'm building sweat equity. Because we're gonna build a really efficient and like cleanly running farm, so that I can keep farming when I'm old, and then it'll like slowly pay out. But yeah, that's how we made money before YouTube, because YouTube's weird. Never thought that YouTube would be what was paying our bills. You guys inspired us to consider putting a roadside stand on our farm. Theft is always a concern. Have you guys had any issues with theft? So some up until this year, we hadn't had any theft at all. We have been dealing with some theft this year, but it's like one specific person, which makes it a little bit easier. So we do have like a camera in there, so we have records, and we've been dealing with the police, and it seems like it's like dealt with now at this point. You know, but that was like one out of however many people come to our stand is like the only person stealing money out of it is like pretty amazing. I don't actually know about like how many bouquets get stolen. Partially because because we pay taxes on every sale, to make it so that we're not paying taxes on any theft by accident, we don't actually track inventory super closely. What we mainly track is sales, right? So what that means is when I'm like, what did the roadside stand do today? I look at how much money I took in. I don't look at like how many bouquets are gone. And like I do, like I know what I put out there. I'm not writing it down. You know, and in future years I probably will. But I know I have a vague idea, and that's like been enough to work with. So I don't know how many bouquets disappear. But I do know that if and when they do disappear, because I'm sure there's like some small amount of actual bouquet theft happening. But when it does happen, it's not like someone comes and like empties the stand. It's not like someone comes and like takes an armful of bouquets. When bouquet theft is happening, it's like someone's taking a single bouquet for themselves. And like we always have extra bouquets anyways that kind of like that are either, you know, getting put in the compost, or, you know, like we try on Tuesdays when we have a lot left over from the weekend to bring them down to the food bank. So it, like I'm kind of like I don't really care. It's not like I'm missing out on a sale of any theft that happens. And then the other thing that makes it hard to track theft and makes me like less wanting to track theft is we have days where the amount of money that ends up in the stand is higher than the number of bouquets that were in the stand. So, you know, if I was like very closely looking at day to day cash flow versus inventory, maybe it would look like there's theft. But in fact, what is happening is people aren't necessarily having cash on hand, and they're, you know, bringing cash the next time they're, you know, in the area type thing, right? So it's not like that there's theft. It's just, you know, because the concept of this, the reason why the stand works is because there's mutual trust, right? Like the stand wouldn't be able to function if I didn't trust that people were going to be paying for the bouquets that they took. And the stand also wouldn't be as low labor as it is for me if the customers coming and shopping at the stand thought that I didn't trust them either, right? Because then they'd be wanting to contact me, and we do have this happen sometimes, where like, because my phone number's posted in it, I'll get a phone call and someone will be like, hey, I just want to let you know that I'm like e-transferring for this bouquet that I'm buying, so like, if you want to check to make sure like I'm not stealing it. And every time that happens, like I'm like, yeah, no, it's fine, don't worry, like, it just auto deposits, like, like we trust you. But every time that like someone feels like we don't trust them, it costs us time in like to do like, and like obviously I don't like, I like interacting with my customers, but it's like easier if my customers think that we trust them too. So we've been really lucky. Yeah, we've been really lucky. The theft isn't really there. But I'm not necessarily looking for theft. But I will say that one thing that we do to kind of like keep it all in balance is I'm cautious about what I'm going to put in the stand. I don't want to put very high theft items in the stand, right? So because like over the years we haven't had much theft, we're gonna put some Christmas ornaments, like the dry flower ornaments, into the stand, and I'm not worried about those getting taken, but those do have more of a product cost to me than the bouquets, right? Because if the bouquets don't sell, they go like, they're a perishable product. There is like an element of product loss just to them that has to be acceptable. But we've talked about maybe getting houseplants, and things like that, or putting vases out there, or other products that would cost me money if someone stole it. So I protect myself from having big losses with what I put in the stands. I probably wouldn't do hanging baskets. I'd probably want hanging baskets to be more of a special order item if we ever did them in the future, because if someone stole a hanging basket from me, that would be quite expensive. We're going to do some experimenting with having plants and seedlings and things out there next year. But maybe the more expensive, like perennials, I'm not going to be super, I don't necessarily want to put like, cost to me $30 rose bushes out, like have $300 worth of rose bushes out at the stand for someone to just pull over and swipe, because if that was to happen, it would be expensive. So if I was going to have products like that were a little bit more costly, maybe I'd kind of have them more protected, things like that, or have them out just on specific days where I watch the stand more. But yeah. Okay, I think okay, let's see. Okay, so this must be when I was talking about lilies. Asiatic, Oriental, or rose lilies. I love rose lilies, but they shed brown stuff. I don't know. I know that there's like, so when a lily, for me, because we sell the lilies open and we take off the pollen when they're open, because that is like dark and staining. It stains the flowers and it like makes a mess on people's counters. But I don't know. I could imagine the rose lilies would maybe have a little bit more of it, because maybe it's like buried in the layers. We don't have any rose lilies on the farm yet, but I really like them. So I would like to maybe get some. But I also would like to get the scented ones. And Ian is like, no stinky lilies. So we'll see. And then someone's asking if I dig them up and replant them every year. And I don't. They're perennial here. They're like super happy. We haven't had any issues with the voles eating them. I think they might be poisonous to the voles. But even if they were to come, I kind of have them spread out. I don't have them bed by bed. We have beds in the farm where the sprinklers run, and so because the sprinkler line runs through there's like a pipe. So I wanted to perennialize whatever bed that was, because I wanted it to be something that I wouldn't have to dig up every year, because it's a pain in the butt to work around the sprinkler lines. So like that's where I put the lilies, but because of that, they're kind of spread out. So I think like even if the voles like found one, we'd be a little bit protected in the fact that we have them like scattered all over. Because over the years it's been like, oh, like I got some lilies, I'll throw some in here. So like I have lilies in like 6 different places on the farm. And if like they are the type of thing eventually I'm gonna have to keep stocking up on them. So like every year I should probably buy like 200 and plant a new bed, because as I pick them they kind of weaken because I'm not leaving them to like have a lot of greenery and like rebuild their energy. But the other nice thing is like, you know, if they were kind of dying out, um, if they were dying out, they I just scrolled. Someone's giving me the peer pressure that I need to do the job that I need to do. If they died out, you know, I could replace spot, right? Do like what I was saying I do with the inconsistently perennial feverfew and anise hyssop. I could just like replace empty spots as the years go on. You know, like funny enough, one of the places that I bought lilies is like from Costco. I didn't order lilies in time for the last set of lilies that I planted. And I was at Costco when all the lilies came in, and I was like, you know what? They're a little bit more expensive than wholesale. Costco has like pretty good deals on their bulbs, and I was like, whatever. Like, I'm just gonna buy this. They look good. So yeah. Okay, do you succession plant sunnies? Yes. So how I do sunflowers is because I direct seed them, and over the years I've gotten lazier and lazier with sunflowers. So I now have a blend, and I kind like I don't by the time summer hits, I'm not I'm not really planting any more things direct seed. Most of my successions at that point are done. So my seeder is basically just set up with sunflowers. And as I use up the sunflowers in the hopper, like it stays set up for sunflowers. And as I use up the sunflowers in my hopper, I like change my custom sunflower blend to like accommodate for the different seasons. So earlier in the season, I start my favorite sunflower is a yellow sunflower with the golden with like the green center instead of the dark center. What are they? Like golden light, I think. I don't know. Orange light, something like that. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. But so that one I have all year round. And then the white, and then I do the white light, white night. I do only pro cuts. And then the double quick. So that is, and plum. I like the plum early too. So that is my that's my early mix. So that's the ones that I want the earliest, and those come like early summer. And then I start mixing in more of like the orangey, like classic sunflowers. And I start mixing in like the red, and I start mixing in some of like the darker tones. And as we go from like early summer to fall, you know, my mix kind of blends like from brighter, lighter colors into like a darker color palette for my sunflowers, because I find that he loves rubbing on this tripod. I find that different sunflower colors sell better at different times of year. And so I do a mix, partially because it makes it so I can be lazier about sunflowers. So because I do a mix, the different colors kind of bloom in succession a bit. So they can be up to like a 2.5 to 3 week succession by doing a variety of colors. And so what that means is that I can do succession planting on sunflowers instead of having to succession plant every single week to have sunflowers every single week. I plant sunflowers every 2 weeks. And then, you know, on week 1, the colors are a little bit different than week 2. But then by week 3, it's actually week 1 on a new bed of sunflower plantings. This year I messed up. I forgot to plant them. The days disappeared and I was like, oh no, I didn't do it. But I have found that with the Pro Cut sunflowers, about 40 days following the cut, and this might be because like I stress them out and it might not be something that they're supposed to do and they just do it for me for some reason, but my Pro Cut sunflowers, after I cut them, because I don't cut them right to the ground, right? Like I usually leave like they're, I don't know, probably like 2 to 3 feet above the ground of a stick that I leave. And then they'll actually send up side shoots off of that. And so I messed up my successions, but I didn't remove my sunflowers because I have like too much, like I don't need to get space at this point in the farm. At this point in the farm, I have lots of space because beds are just emptying up. So I just leave it to do like one fall final cleaning. And because I left them, they've now sent up like side shoots, which are like because I don't want the big sunflowers. They're the perfect size sunflowers for me anyways. So now like my first succession of sunflowers, I'm picking off of, even though like my last succession is just finishing up now. But I will have sunflowers kind of until October on these like weird side shoot sunflowers that I get. So yay, me being lazy by not cleaning up my sunflowers saved my butt. But the best way to do it is to consistently get a calendar, put it on the calendar, make a Google note to myself to like, for it to ding me, Monday, plant your sunflowers. But I really like the mix trick for only having to do it every 2 weeks. You know, let's see. Okay, and then the peer pressure. Did you get your soil test results? No, I didn't, because I haven't done my soil tests yet, because I forgot. Like planting sunflower successions. But thank you for asking me if I got my results yet, because I'm going to do that. The one thing about soil tests is you ideally should have a time of year when you do all your soil tests, so that you can consistently track from year to year, because what the results look like in the fall versus what they look like in the spring for the same soil would be different. So, you know, it's not horrible if fall ends up being the time of year when I do my soil tests, but I need to do it. So thank you. Thank you for reminding me that I need to do it, because we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan for how we're going to amend our soil for next year. What's the best-selling filler flower? So because we don't sell individual flowers, I can't say what's the best-selling, right? Because for me, if the only answer I can give for what is the best-selling is what is the best-selling recipe, right? Because we have specific bouquet recipes that, you know, they change as the flowers change. But, you know, every week when I go to the market, and I don't know how much this translates in the videos. I was saying to Ian that we need to make a video like about like how, like, oh, there's 8 bouquets that are going to the market, right? So when I make, this last weekend is a good example. So I make, currently the bouquets are quite large, so I can only fit 4 per bucket, and I make 2 buckets of the same bouquets to go down to the market, at least. So I make 8 of the exact same bouquet at a time. And the recipes that I know are the absolute best-selling recipes, I'll usually make like 12. I'll make 3 full buckets or I'll make 2 variations. So there's actually 16 of very similar bouquets. But so this week I made a pink bouquet, I made a white bouquet, I made a jewel tone bouquet. Oh, I made a purple and yellow bouquet. I made a pink and orange bouquet. I made a rainbow bouquet. And then I made like this like coral and green bouquet. And then I made Lysianthus and status bunches. Yeah. So I had at the market, I had eight, even though I made 70 bouquets, I actually had 8 recipes, and then, or 9 recipes, I guess. And at the market, my best-selling bouquet recipe was my rainbow bouquet. So at the market and at the stand, the best-selling was rainbow. At the market last week, Lysianthus and status bunches was a bestseller, but at the stand, Lysianthus and status bunches sells very poorly. At the market, my Zowie bouquet recipe was a bestseller. At the stand, the Zowie bouquet recipe doesn't sell very well. At the market, white sold very well, and pink came home. But at the stand, pink is a bestseller, and the coral and green was also a bestseller when it wasn't necessarily at the market. And no one this year likes Jewel, Jewel tones. But last year, Jewel Tone was my #1 bestseller, and Jewel Tone might still be a bestseller once we get into the fall because the color palettes change. For me, when I'm like, oh, rainbow's a bestseller, what I'll do moving forward is I'll make rainbow. I'll keep making rainbow until rainbow stops selling. And what goes into rainbow will change as the flowers change. And for me, in general, rainbow is always a bestseller. And because I know rainbow's a bestseller spring, summer, fall, I make rainbow spring, summer, fall. And because I know I can make rainbow spring, summer, fall, when I buy seeds and flowers and everything, I'm always looking for blue, because blue's the hard one for rainbow. So I'm always looking for a spring, summer, fall blue version to be able to always make my rainbow bouquets. So, I never actually think about like what's the best selling filler, because I'm thinking more total recipe. But I am, if we were to sell wholesale, then that would be different, right? Then I'd be like, oh, hey, I can sell a crazy amount of feverfew. All my florists want to buy lots of feverfew. It's a bestseller, right? Like, so as the business model changes a little bit, I'd be better able to answer some of these questions, hopefully, in the future. Okay, let's see. I feel like I'm in no way. I feel like there's probably a gazillion questions on here. Oh, I wonder what the nurseries give dahlias to make them flower in May. I think they give them like just crazy amounts of fertilizer. I worked in a nursery when, like, 20 years ago for a summer. My mom got a job. Oh yeah, and hormones. They give them hormones too. My mom got me a job at a nursery. I didn't want to, but she forced me because she had a job at a nursery. And it was interesting to see some of the stuff that they did. I'm trying to scroll through this and see if there's any questions. Okay, here's a question. At nurseries, they have like these fertigation systems, and so they in their water line they inject like fertilizer. So like every single time the plants get watered, they're getting fertilizer. Like they do all these like really cool things. And the nursery that I worked at, it was like more of a shrub and tree nursery was the spot that I was at. I think they had another spot where they did like perennials and things like that. And it was really interesting like how they managed. And like one of the cool things was like how aggressive they were, because everything was in pots, right? So you had to like, everything was bonsaied basically. You just had to, so we'd have these like shrubs and they'd grow, right? Because they were like getting fertilized, and like it'd be like, oh, like you just keep taking care of them until they get sold. And so they'd be these shrubs, they'd be in these like 1 gallon pots. And they'd like outgrow their pots, so we'd have to give them haircuts, and so we'd just grab it, go grrr, and you'd like grab it, and then it would be like, get it in your hand, and then anything above your hand just like cut. It would be like snip, and then it would be like ping, and it'd be this like perfect little puff ball that would then be the size of the pot. But it felt like, oh my god, like how can these survive like being handled in this like aggressive, horrible way? And they were like, yeah, I love it because I'm in this pot, I'm just getting fertilizer nonstop, so it was kind of interesting. I got really good at carrying 4 pots at a time in one hand. Okay, let's see. Do you deal with pests, insects ruining your flowers? I've been battling grasshoppers and spider mites so bad this season. I feel like nobody talks about it, or they don't experience it as bad. So for me, like I have like major issues with grasshoppers. One of the reasons why you don't really see me talking about like pests, and like damage, is that it's like, of course, like I'm like, we don't use any pesticides, of course there's going to be pests. The best way to prevent like pest pressure is to grow the healthiest plants possible, which is easier said than done. And so for me, I find when the pest pressure gets so bad that the crop is essentially taken out, at that point the crop is so unhappy and unhealthy anyways that it's kind of like, like there's tons of things like there's tons of stuff that's like just complete crop loss for me, right? There's lots of things where it's like, oh, I plant an entire 50-foot bed and it doesn't work out, but I plant so much. Or like when it comes to like insect damage, it's just like, oh yeah, this is eaten, right? Like whatever, like I have like 1,000 flowers, so 10% of them are eaten by bugs. I still have 900 flowers, right? I just it's expected that that's going to happen. So like I don't even worry about it. When you're more on like a garden scale, it's a lot more stressful. But at the same time, you can maybe do something to manage it on a smaller scale because you can give time to it. Whereas for me, if my crop gets full of bugs, I'm better off to just leave it and move on to something else and be like, well, hopefully learn a lesson for next year. And like a good example is last year, my yarrow, all of my perennial yarrow was filled with aphids to the point that I like couldn't use the crop at all. It was fine because I had a new planting of yarrow that year in a different spot that didn't have any aphids on it, and so I still had lots of yarrow, and I cut down the yarrow that had bugs on it and didn't use that at all this year. I was like, I think it got, even though yarrow is drought tolerant, I think I wasn't giving it enough water, and that is the reason that it got attacked by aphids, because it was stressed out from needing more water. This year, I went forward making the educated guess that that is what's happening. I watered my yarrow like twice as much. This year, 0 aphids. It's happy. It's fine. So I'm like, okay, yay. Like, yarrow just needs a little bit more water or else it gets aphids on it, which wouldn't be a problem if it was in the garden, because it didn't visually look bad. It had bugs on it, so I couldn't sell it. And there's no world in which I'm washing bugs off. So yeah, one other thing too is I am really lucky for pest pressure, because where I am, it's hot and dry, which keeps bugs down. It limits, like there's no slugs for me. If it's too dry, they die. Like aphids and grasshoppers are my main pests. And then I'm zone 5, like I'm fairly cold. So those cold winters do kill off a lot of the pest pressure that different areas like a zone 6, zone 7, zone 8 is going to be dealing with. So we are very lucky for pest pressure. But yeah, my biggest issue with the grasshoppers, right? Because like I said, if I lose 10% of my blooms, I still have 900 when there's 1,000. So I still have more than enough. But my problem is the grasshoppers spread viruses. So there's a lot of things that I don't do on the farm because the grasshoppers are just continuously spreading like mosaic viruses and aster yellow disease. Like it's just horrible where I am. At this point, my cosmos are like pretty sick, pretty consistently sick. I probably have like 5% of my cosmos have aster's yellow disease at this point from grasshoppers nibbling on the plants, which is fine because they're annuals. But I would love to invest into echinacea, but they're super susceptible to aster's yellow disease. If I spent $1,000 and put in a couple beds of echinacea, the grasshoppers would nibble on a leaf, give it aster's yellow disease, and in a couple of years, like the plants would be gone, completely dead. And even the grasshoppers have been an issue for me for dahlias. So I did super weird planting dahlias in July, because what has happened with me in the past with dahlias is I plant them early on. The grasshoppers eat them because they have these beautiful lush leaves. They get different mosaic viruses, which then lead to sickly plants in the fall when they would be like the most happy, because the dahlias don't actually like how hot we are in the summer. It's just it's too hot and dry. So they kind of perform the best in the fall, but because they're sick, then they don't perform very well in the fall. And then because the grasshoppers carry viruses, and so once they have a virus, they have the entire plant has it. So then I don't even necessarily want to save tubers on them. So the whole the whole cycle resets. This year I planted my dahlia tubers in July. The plants are coming up now. I've kind of missed the worst window of grasshopper pressure. And there's so many other things for the grasshoppers to eat that they're not right on the dahlias. So I'm hoping that'll keep viruses out of the dahlias. The dahlias are super happy, super healthy. They're going to bloom for me in the fall. And then maybe I can save them, throw the tubers in the fridge, pull them back out in July, and maybe that's a system. But yeah, no, it's a hard one. Like I really feel for people. I see some of the bug stuff. And it's just crazy. Some of the bugs that people have to deal with. I no wind, very few bugs. Like I have to water. I don't get rain. It would be nice if I didn't have to irrigate, but I feel a lot of gratitude. I'm very lucky. Let's see. Was anyone in your family farmers before you, or were you the first to start this lifestyle? So I've always been really into gardening, but there's no farming. My mom growing up was like really into like decorative, like horticulture, like flowers and things like that. And I was like, flowers, like whatever. Like, no, I'm all about like food gardens. And she was like, no food gardens. And so, when I moved out, I got my own garden. I've been gardening for 20 years now. There's a good question. I've been gardening for 20 years, and like Ian really enjoys the gardening. And then, like I said, and I know that question might be up before I was talking about it, but we really enjoy the outdoor work. Kind of the backstory to it is that, like in our friends group, was like Curtis Stone, who went on. He's the reason why we have a YouTube channel. He was like, oh, you guys got to do YouTube. But he started a farm, and it was kind of like, oh wow, like I didn't know that was an option. You could start a farm. We really enjoyed like seeing what he was doing with the farm and everything, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, we could do that. And then it paired really well with Ian's work in the fact that it's intensive labor in the summer, can take some time off in the winter. So just it paired well with what we're interested in. I'm really into like time spatial planning. I always said that my dream job was to be a warehouse manager. So one of my favorite things about farming is I get to bring my time spatial planning skills to the farm, and so we enjoy it. We like being outdoors. We like doing physical work, and it's amazing, right? To like see everything growing. It's really fun. Okay. Why do you not send $35 bouquets to the market? So I get this all the time. People are always like, "Oh, you got to do mason jars. You got to like do bouquets." So the first thing we tried to sell was like jars of flowers, and like they would not sell at all. And so we actually stopped doing jars and started doing wrapped bouquets, or they weren't even wrapped, like because we used to do $10 bouquets, and I was like, I can't wrap them. They just have to be like in a bucket. But we'd bring jars, we'd bring bouquets. No one would buy the jars. The bouquets would sell. And then the other thing about the jars is they're really hard to transport. They're really difficult to bring down to the market. But I'm always like, no, like there has to be some interest. So every year, multiple times a year, I like send vases down to the market because I'm like, no, there has to be someone who wants these. And like it's year 5, right? So it's like, like Ian's like, stop doing it. I hate them. He's like, I hate them. They spill in the car. They're a mess. Like, please don't do it. We can't fit very many in the car. They take up so much space. But I force him, send them down, and then like they don't sell. So, like I'm like, okay, fine, they don't sell. But so doing the $35 vases this year, like seeing that we were able to sell some of them in the stand is exciting for me. Because it's fun. It's fun to get to do something different. I will say though that they're very, very underpriced. Those like $35 ones that I've been like putting up. Basically I've been using up my short stems. It'd be like my workflow is I make bouquets, and then when I'm done making the bouquets, the stuff that's like short and leftovers is there, and then I'm like, okay, I'll put together a couple of these vases. And for me, it's also like it's practice for making kind of like a higher price point arrangement. But honestly, most of them are like have like $50-$60 worth of flowers in them. The price point of like $35 is just kind of like, that's the point at which I can offer like an arrangement. But yeah, they've been a crazy deal because I've just been having so much fun making them. And then it's fun. I've been putting up pictures of them on Instagram, and I usually make two. I make two different looking ones because they don't sell that well. I'll usually like put them out, and then like one of them will sell because I usually do them twice a week, and usually I put it out and only one of the two will sell. And so then the other one I bring in after it's been out for like a day or two, and it's starting to be like, oh, okay, I should like replace it. And so then I bring it in, and then I have it in the house, and then and then I do it again, and then so I have like two in the house that are usually rotating. I have like one in the kitchen on the windowsill, and I have one over by where Ian edits his videos, so we always kind of have fresh flowers that way. So part of it is it's like it's a way of like making them for myself and practice, but then people get a sweet deal. But I think that's why they've been selling also, is like they're pretty obviously like a crazy deal, even though they're $35. But yeah. Okay. Are you all going to plant more veggies next year? So, the plan this year was to plant more veggies. I started these eggplants. I had them growing, and I never got them planted. Someone's saying their anise hyssop is 6 feet tall. That's like pretty amazing. Mine is not that tall, but I also didn't think mine was going to get tall enough to use in bouquets this year, because it was like very sad, tiny little. I did them in like the micro soil blocks, and I like I was not kind to them. So I was like, like they'll be there for next year. They'll get established. But now they've ended up, they're probably like 3 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall, and like, you know, each single plant has like tons of stems that I'm cutting off of it. It's like four massive stems per plant. So they've been amazing. I'm very excited to have it for next year because it's an entire 50-foot bed of it. Oh, so much. Oh, I'm rich. I'm rich in anise hyssop. Yeah, I don't know. I forget what I was saying. I got distracted by the anise hyssop because I'm like so in love with it. Oh, thanks so much, Mother's Nature's Apothecary. Oh, thank you. That's very generous. Let's see. I have to make sure I support all the beautiful bouquets I get to enjoy. Well, I owe you a bouquet. If you're ever in the area, take one out of the stand, and then then I won't think that someone stole it. I'll be like, I probably just told someone to take the bouquet, right? That's how like I can like feel good about if bouquets disappear, because I tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, like just grab a bouquet, right? So that's another reason why I don't worry. Oh, different color anise hyssops. Yeah, okay, so anise hyssop is supposed to be... Oh, thanks so much, Kelly Foreman. Oh, the stickers, they entertain me so much. Yeah, so anise hyssop is supposed to be, like, super hardy in my zone, because I'm, like, zone 5. But I think that the problem with it is that it doesn't root super deep, and our ground freezes harder. This is like my new theory. I'm like, everything needs to be zone 4, I think. Even though I'm technically a zone 5, because we have no snow often in the winter when it gets to the coldest times of the year. So I think that like cold hardiness actually doesn't have anything to do with ambient air temperature. This is my new theory. You tell me if I'm a crazy person, but until someone proves me wrong, I'm pretty sure I'm onto something with this. But I think that cold hardiness isn't, because it's tracked by ambient air temperature, but I don't think that's a good way of tracking it, because I think what cold hardiness more so has to do with is how deep the freeze can be and have plants still survive, right? So like in a zone 5, that plant can survive like there being like 3 inches of the ground being frozen. There's enough roots down below that it's not going to like kill off the plant. And so even though our ambient air temperatures in winter are not so cold as in zone 5, because there's no snow on the ground insulating the soil, we have a lot of things that should be fine in zone 5 that die, I think, because it is more sensitive to how deep our ground freezes, because we don't have the snow to keep the soil from freezing during those cold periods of time. That's, I think I'm onto something with that. But I also know that some plants get stressed out, because we can go from like, it's summer, because we have like full on, it's summer all through September, and then it goes like boom, and it gets cold, right? So we go like hot, and cold. And I think because there isn't like the transition, and we're the same, like, this is like how our weather goes. Like, it's cold. Oh my God, it's summer, right? So we don't have a spring. And then it does the same thing. Summer. Oh my God, it's freezing. It's winter. And I think that can be a little hard, a little hard on plants. It's hard on me too. When I'm like, it's summer, and then it's cold, and then I'm like outside, like, oh, my hands. I don't want to work in the freezing cold. Bring the summer back. Okay, see. What are your best tips for controlling the weeds in your garden? So when you're a gardener, you weed your garden, right? But when you're a farmer, one of the most important jobs that you do on the farm is cultivation. And what cultivation is it's working the soil to remove all the weeds, right? But like, and I think about this, and it's like farmers like just so much take for granted weeds, right? Because it's all weeds all the time, nonstop weeds, right? Like you can't be like, oh, is there weeds in that garden? It's like, yeah, I like went to bed, I woke up, there's weeds. Like it's just all weeds, right? So your job is just to like weed all the time, just all the time. It's just nonstop weeding. So, it's so much just like weeding that you're not even weeding anymore. There's like a new word for it. It's cultivating, right? It's like your job is literally just to keep the weeds out. But yeah, like so the way you grow stuff helps, right? Like I grow stuff really densely, so you only have to weed it when the plants are small. And then like tools, right? Like all these hoes and all these things. There's like lots of different systems. But I think like once you embrace that your job is just weeding, right? Like it's not a chore, right? It's like weeding is like doing the dishes, right? It's not like, oh, I gotta I don't know what's like a chore. Oh, I haven't washed the walls yet this year. No, weeding is like the dishes. It's always there. You always need to do it. And if you don't do it, it very quickly becomes a problem, right? If you just do it and you don't think about it, then it's fine. But if you dwell on it too much, then you get very depressed. But yeah, no, there's lots and lots of weeds. We wheel hose for the paths, tine weeders, I own a lot of different weeding tools and I suck at it, right? Like what I need to do is get systems in place where it's like every week you cultivate the soil. Every week you go do the hoe. I really like, if you want to get into some tools, get into some ideas. I really enjoy NeverSink. He has like great systems for like thinking about weeding, staying on top of weeding. I really like his wire weeder system. We don't have it. We have like a different wire weeder, but I really like the wire weeders. And he shows how easy it is if you just always do it. So he has some really great content on YouTube. NeverSink Farms or NeverSink Tools. I can't remember kind of what his main channel is, but yeah, he's got some good stuff. And oh yeah, except for, here's another question: how much do you have rhizomatous grass? And that's the problem for me, right? Like weeds, I'm like whatever, like pigweed, like spiny amaranth, like whatever you want to call it. Like those, I'm like, yeah, great. This, like, if I could just weed this all day, like amazing. I don't even care when it goes to seed. I'm like, sure, whatever. Have a million of them next year. Like, doesn't matter. That's easy. But the grass is really nasty, and that's why we till so much. Yeah, I know people are like, oh, you can't till grass. It like chops it up and makes it a million things. But it's like you can't weed grass either. If you chop it up into a million pieces, at least then you can weed out the million pieces. But you can't like lift an entire carpet of grass out of the ground. So we try our hardest to stay on top of the grass, because when the grass gets in, then it's not easy to get out again. One of the things that we do for the grass is, because everywhere, all this green that you see, this is a rhizomatous grass. So, and I think I can't see if behind me is like a good example of like something that we do. So the garden beds start there, but there's this like buffer of black, and we put a strip of landscape fabric between the beds and like the grass, because that is like the grass buffer. The grass is still going to grow under that, but it slows it down a little bit. And then what we do on the farm is we do this thing called a grass mout. Copyrighted, that's like a Serina term right there. And the grass moat is once a month. We take the tiller and Ian tills the perimeter of the farm. And what that does is it breaks up any of the grass that's been like slowly trying to work its way into the farm. It like chops it up and sets it back. And we found if we do that, it keeps most of the grass out of the farm. And then we just have to maintain that the grass in the farm is out. And then it's easy. Then cultivation, right? Then get the wire weeder once a week, right? Like wheel hoe on the paths. Landscape fabric can be down to help, The one thing about landscape fabric is you can't use these cultivation tools. The weeds still grow, like, so you have the circles, right? You like put the plant in, but then you have all the space around it until it grows bigger and covers. So even like with landscape fabric, you have to hand weed. You know, depending on how slow growing the crops are, we do 2 hand weeds around the plant, like one pretty early on, and then, you know, another one kind of like, you know, 2 weeks later type thing, and then hopefully by a month the plant has bushed up enough to make it so that the weeds can't germinate. They don't have light to germinate. You know, and then at that point we can probably get through the year until, you know, the end when the plant dies, and then the weeds will start growing again. But yeah, you know, if you don't like weeding, can't start a farm, because then you'll just be sad all the time because all you do is weed. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna go 2 hours. I'm sure I'd got like nowhere. Oh yeah, because this is like when I was like, oh, like that book. Yeah, I'm sure there's like a million questions. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't get that far. I got like nowhere. But thanks so much for coming and hanging out. Next week is going to be the members only live. So next week, only people who are members of the channel. There's like a join button, and then, you know, it's like $5 a month. And, you know, it's basically just if you want to support me. And then I do like one of the lives just for them because it's kind of fun. It's like a smaller group, so, you know, that makes it a little bit. You guys, like, I love you guys, and like it blows my mind that so many of you want to come hang out and listen to me ramble, but the chat gets really intimidating for me. So it's, you know, it's nice to have a more casual live once a month. But yeah, maybe what I'll do though is, maybe what I should do is like make another community post, and then not next week, but the week after, we can do another questions one. And then but it can just be questions that you guys like post up ahead of time, you know, and then I can like pick like which one got the most votes type thing to prioritize. You know, because I like answering your questions. You know, I know that a lot of the stuff that we do in the videos doesn't necessarily always make sense for why we do it. So that's like that's why we enjoy doing these live videos so much. We like giving you like the nuance and the details, you know, and also like makes me think about like why I'm doing stuff, you know, and I like, you know, sometimes I'm like chat out ideas with you guys, gets a lot of clarity for me too. So, you know, we really appreciate how much you guys, you know, support us in these live videos. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to try, probably not tomorrow, but probably Wednesday morning we'll have another video, and then maybe for the weekend we'll finally have the one for the fire. We got a bunch of we got some good videos filmed, and we have some like fun ideas for, you know, because we like, it's crazy that it's like so late in the year. I can't believe that it's like September already, which means, you know, there's only like 6-7 more weeks of markets, right? Gotta get all the flower joy before the frost comes, and we move on to dried flowers and evergreens and stuff for the rest of the year. So Ian and I, we have to work hard and make lots of videos for the last of the market season. So we got some good stuff coming. Stay tuned. Okay, thanks so much, guys. I'll see you next time.